US, most of us are on our phones on average 6 hours per day. 6 hours! Ciao VISIEM, hi all! So today I'm gonna talk about our phone addiction, aka our normal use of phones, and I find this topic particularly difficult to talk about because for me personally, confronting my own phone addiction means to confront my social media usage. So I can't really make this video without talking about two of these things, and also my thoughts and feelings about social media are extremely complex. It's not black and white, so I want to give it as much nuance as possible. So yeah, let's get into it. So first of all, just to give some background, for me personally, I have had the iPhone now for 3 years because I bought it when I started my PhD, because that's when I could afford it, got my first stipend check, and you know, could afford a phone and a computer. And yeah, so it's really been 3 years only, because prior to that, I actually, for a while, I didn't have a phone at all. I was using my partner's previous phone, which was an iPhone, but because I didn't have data or service of any kind, it was like it was functioning as an iPod, because you know, I could use it with Wi-Fi but nothing else. And prior to that, in college, I did have like a smartphone of some sort, the one where you like slide it up and it has a keyboard, but I bought service for it like 6 months out of the year, and it was, I mean, it had like 3 apps, certainly nothing like an iPhone. So I'm new to this problem. I haven't been able to have this problem for most of my life. And then when I look at my phone use, and especially my social media use, obviously it increased dramatically when I got the iPhone 3 years ago, but it also increased dramatically because I started the PhD. Those things happened simultaneously. And for me, when I started the PhD, I moved back to the US from Thailand, where I was the happiest I'd ever been. My life was great. I was in community and among people that were very open-minded and interesting, and you know, interested in making some changes in the world. Like just a very much a bubble. And then I came back to the US, where just capitalism like boom, like places this thing on you, and all of a sudden I was around like all these, it was really depressing to come back to this and, you know, try to rejoin all the superficial conversations and constantly be fed information on like, you should buy this, you should want this. And additionally to that, I started my PhD, and if you had watched like a number of my videos, you have heard me talk about how how much institutional violence that entailed, how painful and hard it was, you know, like having severe anxiety attacks, panic attacks, depression, and so on, all of that because of this PhD. So it was not an easy time. And while my mental health was suffering because of the PhD and having just moved from Thailand to the United States, I was also, you know, I had just moved to a new city, Baltimore, where I didn't know anybody. I had no friends. The people that I was exposed to in my department at university didn't click really. So I was going through a lot, and honest to God, at that time, social media truly saved my life. It was a way for me to connect with people who actually, you know, felt the same way I do or had similar experiences. It helped me connect with my friends, and I have unfortunately, you know, went to like an international boarding school, and most of my friends are around the globe. I mean, like literally not around the country, not around a particular state. I mean, like my best friends are everywhere from like South Africa to Myanmar. So it's kind of crucial for me to be able to connect with them and talk to them, to be on social media, to update each other, and so on. And at that time, I reconnected with so many like-minded friends of mine and different people. I felt like I had an avenue in which to express myself, especially at a time when my authentic self, like everything about my authentic self within academia was devalued and, you know, institutionally tried to forcefully change every single aspect of myself. And additionally, I also felt like you know, a first-generation high school graduate, an immigrant, a lower class, working class person, I was someone that was never, ever meant to get to a PhD, especially not at Johns Hopkins University. So I also felt like I had this kind of duty to share and to open, you know, these gates of like mystery and talk about what's really going on in there. So I use my social media a lot to do that, and I think that's really valuable as well, because it's something I wish others had done. So while I will be spending the other half of this video mostly talking about the problem that we have with our phones and with social media as well, I do not ever want to be associated with the anti-social media crowd, because frankly, it's a lot of misogyny and elitism going on over there. And I could do another video just to talk about that, but frankly, everybody needs to just shut the fuck up about women posting their selfies and feeling themselves, or posting their breakfast or meals or whatever. In a world where we are constantly made to feel insecure and, you know, like devalued and so on, let us, and trust me, any critique that you're making of that, whatever you're thinking, you know, whatever you think you're tapping into it, misogyny, baby, that's what you're doing. Let women do their thing. Let us be happy, period, okay? People talking about others, like I said before during quarantine, like posting their baked breads or whatever, let people be happy. What is wrong with y'all? So it's a lot of misogyny going on there, and God forbid these women are making money off of social media. Then men are angry. Oh no, how dare you? We sexualize you from head to toe, and then you dare to profit from this? No, they're not happy about it. Anyways, and then the other thing is, it's a lot of elitism going on there, because social media is knowledge, and it's knowledge. People are able to spread knowledge and to talk about things that we cannot talk about academia, and also people who cannot get into, who can never get through these gates to talk about all of these things, okay? So all this radical stuff that I've learned, all this smash white supremacist capitalist patriarchy stuff that I've learned, all this stuff about, you know, like patriarchy and racism and social justice and political learning, a lot of my political learning has happened either through my own personal experiences out in the world, or Instagram and Twitter, baby. Let's be clear about this. As my Twitter bio, my Twitter pinned tweet says, PhDs for the resume. Twitter is where I do my learning, and it's true. So it's a lot of elitism if you're gonna be shitting on these apps, not recognizing that for some people, that's the only access they have to their, to education, to knowledge, and it's also where actual knowledge is shared, that's not, censored by a lot of different institutions and so on. So shitting on these apps just because you use them to look at some superficial content and stuff like that, honey, that's quite literally a you problem, okay? Not everybody does that. But regardless of all of that, I have definitely felt, especially over the last year or so, that I want to reduce my screen time, period. Definitely reduce my phone time, because I'm very much in tune with my energies and, like all that stuff. And I just feel like it's wrong how much we are on our phones. And mind you, I'm not even on it that much. I'll talk about that later. But anyways, so I just finished reading this book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, which I highly, highly recommend. And I'm gonna do a quick summary for y'all of some of the main things that I took away from it, because I'm just reading books out here that are not on my comprehensive exams list, so I might as well share. So first of all, if you have even the slightest interest in reducing your screen time or in reducing your social media or whatever other app you use, the first thing I highly recommend is that you actually do some research on reading on just what our phone use does to us mentally and physically, especially the hours per day that we use our phone, which have increased so much, and just hours that we're on screens in general, and also how tech companies manipulate all that and manipulate us and all that stuff. And I'm saying that because, I don't know, maybe you're better than me, but for me personally, I always felt like, I already know this shit, I already know it's bad to be on my phone. I know that it, reduces my attention span and memory, and that, Facebook is evil and all that stuff, and why should I bother? But genuinely, it's one thing to think we know it, but it's a completely other thing to actually read and look at exactly what's going on, exactly what's happening to our bodies, our brains, and exactly what these tech companies and apps and all that stuff is doing to us. As I said, I'm basing all of this on, I read that book, How to Break Up with Your Phone, but once I finished with that book, I read 5 other books. Girl, I read Mindful Tech, like I don't remember any of the names now because I read it all on my Kindle, but I went minimalism, tech minimalism, or all of these things. I don't stop with one book, just like a true ass academic. But I'm gonna be talking mostly about the first book because I took some notes of it, and I just wanted to share some things that really spoke to me. But once again, this is like 1/1 billionth of what's actually like what we should know. So just some numbers. In the US, most of us are on our phones on average 6 hours per day. 6 hours, 6 hours, that's so bad. Plus those numbers are way, way, way higher the younger you are. So, for teenagers, that can go up to like 9, 10, 11 hours. I mean, like insane hours. And then about 75% of us have our phone always in arm's reach, which means we don't ever need to actually stand up and go get it. 75% of us at all times during the day. True? Me too. Most of us bring our phone to the bathroom. Most of us also sleep with our phone, meaning it's either in our bed or close to our bed, like in our bedroom. And of course, all that stuff is not great. I mean, like, it's even proven that just the presence of a smartphone on like a dinner table, even if it's facing down, decreases the quality of the conversation, the ability for us to be present with each other, and so on. Let alone something like sleeping with our phone, or like taking it to the bathroom, spending 6, 7, 8 hours per day on our phones. Like, clearly it's not great. So some physical effects that this causes. I have my notes here. So some physical effects is excessive phone time reduces our attention span. Obviously, we are in a constant state of distraction, like constantly distracted. Reduces our memory, reduces our ability to form new memories, but also our ability to recall older memories. Completely fucks up our sleep. I mean, like, hard. And part of it is like the blue light effect, like staring at a screen and basically like inducing jet lag, like telling our eyes and our brain that like, no, it's still day, like you need to be up and so on, which is why obviously we struggle to fall asleep. But also, just the fact that, and as she writes in the book, actually I don't know, the author was a woman, I don't know, I just had a feeling that she was. But anyways, as she writes in the book, when we are basically like going to bed with our phone in our bedroom, or having used our phone and within the last 30 minutes before sleep, or an hour or something, it's like we're going to sleep in a room with the TV on, with all of our friends in the same room, having political debates, commenting, posting, and so on. And that's something that I actually feel too, because even though I generally sleep well, and I try not to be on my phone too much before bedtime, there's still that sense of like, my brain can't stop thinking about it because there's so much activity happening even on my phone, even when I put my phone away. And that's like another thing. The statistics on like how much information we are consuming and exposed to nowadays is just like out of this world. I think I heard this morning in one of my mindfulness apps that I was listening to, something like, today, like these days, the information that I get exposed to in 24 hours is as much as Shakespeare would have been exposed to in his entire life. Like, we were never made to be consuming this much information, like, and basically like as if we were machines, like that's not, we were never made to do that. And mentally, of course, it causes us anxiety, depression, even eating disorders and body issues, especially talking about things like Instagram. It increases negativity, lowers our life quality, and also lowers our social interactions, of course, because there's almost always a phone in between when we're interacting with people. And this is especially bad for teenagers and younger people, which, honest to God, the more I really force myself to think about this, the crazier it gets, because, like, when you're grown, and I'm 27, so I'm quite grown, I can still be manipulated easily and so on, but I'm more secure in who I am and what I am, and, able to draw boundaries, and, gone through some self-healing and stuff like that. But when I was a teenager, imagine being like 15 or 16 and having all your middle school and high school constantly on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Instagram and stuff like that, being exposed to all of these things, and, fear of missing out, and unrealistic beauty standards and all the stuff that you're constantly exposed to. It's really, really bad. And statistics show that. I mean, it's like And that's why I also say, like, read the actual data, because there's legit, like, evidence that for teenagers, for example, spending as little as 20 minutes on Facebook per day, like, increases depressive thoughts by like 15% or something. I mean, like, it's bad. It's really bad. And even which I also found interesting, even the things that show, the studies that show, oh, in many ways, like, the younger generation's doing better. There's less, like, driving drunk accidents, and there's less, you know, whatever, this type of accident or that type of accident. It's mostly because kids these days are at home on their phones, being depressed, anxious, and sad. So there's even statistics that kids these days are having much less sex. Who knew? I mean, it's bad. Of course, it is precisely these, you know, this anxiety, this insecurity, this fear of missing out, all of this, you know, loneliness and depression and so on, that these apps and tech companies then manipulate, which is like the most evil part of it all. So something that I personally didn't know about Instagram is that apparently, because, you know, like, all of these apps know everything about us, every last thing, they know us better than our moms, and when they see that you've been on Instagram like less than you normally are, you know, like, kind of like they need to incentivize you to get back on, and then you post something, all of a sudden Instagram will intentionally withhold the likes that you're getting. They won't show them to you for a set period of time that they decide based on your use, what the time period is, so as to increase your insecurity. And the more insecure you are, the more likely you're going to get back on Instagram, keep posting, sharing, commenting, liking, because, you know, you need to get back on it. Your friends are not fucking with your content anymore. Something's wrong. So hearing something like this, once again, like, and especially thinking about it with younger people, I mean, it's like straight evil Instagram. And once again, for like the babies, like the babies that were born with the iPhone already out, so like the kids that are like 10 years old now or whatever, I don't know exactly when the iPhone came out. We don't even have data on them at all. But even, you know, like, in general, it's hard for us to have concrete data because it's a recent phenomena. Another major takeaway for me was that actually we as humans are unable to multitask. We cannot do two tasks at once. There are two tasks that are cognitively demanding. We simply cannot do that. So, you know, they even did a research on people who think they're great multitaskers, and they, you know, did a study on them and like researched and so on, and it turned out that they're terrible at every single aspect of multitasking. They're terrible at disregarding irrelevant information, recognizing important information, just the whole thing terrible. So LOL at tech bros in Silicon Valley drinking Soylent for lunch and thinking they're so productive. Takes our brains 25 minutes to switch from one task to the other. And this goes even, like, they say, like, every time you receive a phone call and then you finish it, it takes your brain 25 minutes to, like, you know, fully engage into something else. So then when we think about our phones and, you know, social media or games, whatever you're doing on it, like, yeah, you start seeing that there's a problem. We're working at a speed of a machine when we are not machines, we are human beings, obviously. To this point of, you know, multitasking and stuff like that, not only is it unproductive, because I want to make it clear, I don't give two shits about productivity. I am not interested in making myself more productive to make profit for somebody else by using less my phone or social media or whatever. Not interested at all. Not only it makes us less productive, it is also mentally exhausting. Like, our working memory is constantly overflooded. It's consuming entirely too much information, which is why we can't focus, we can't sleep. You know, we're living very like detached lives, and that stuff is what interests me. This loss of focus is definitely very good to certain companies. So something called the attention economy, which basically means that, you know, like, companies have already recognized that our attention is a scarce resource and they're fighting over it, which is why, you know, they try to take it from us. And as consumers, we are only profitable and good when we're distracted. You know, that's very important. Focus isn't profitable, distraction is, and that's, you know, part of attention economy. And right now our default state is distraction, just constant distraction. You know, this is where social media is particularly bad because it is infinite, okay? When you're scrolling, it's infinite. You can do this forever. You can stay distracted forever. As opposed to doing real life activities, like if I read an article, there is a natural stopping cue. Like, this was the end of the article. Lulu, do you want to read another article or go for a walk? You know, if I finish, I don't know, one activity, like I paint something or draw something, or I run a couple of miles or whatever, every single activity that we have in real life, there's some type of natural stopping cue that signals to us, okay, you did this, do you want to do this again, or do you want to do something else? Social media, you know, things like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but I'm sure plenty other apps, like those are just the only ones that I use, does not have that. They have removed, and that's intentional, it's by design, that they've removed all of those stopping cues so that they just don't have them. We keep scrolling constantly, infinitely. And so while there's nothing really wrong with some mindless distraction, the problem is that we're not necessarily choosing it anymore. Like, our choice and our control has been removed by design. Now when I go on Instagram or Twitter, it's not by choice that I end up spending like an hour on it. It's because they've removed all stopping cues, they've made it, you know, manipulated my attention and so on, so that I'd be on it, so that, you know, I wouldn't be able to stop. And what I also found interesting, and what they talked about in the book, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It's extremely easy for people who make apps to basically make it in a way where, like, I don't know, I open Instagram and I say, I want to be on Instagram right now for 20 minutes, you know, throw me off after 20 minutes, or I want to be exposed only to this and this content, or on Twitter, you know, I want to be this, I want to insert these stopping cues and stuff like that. It's all stuff that's extremely doable. So it's by design. Of course, they don't want to have those things. So basically, these infinite scrolling apps are like slot machines, and that's really bad for us and extremely addictive, and it has removed all stopping cues, to the point where it is now extremely difficult for us to use them in moderation because of the design, which is why, at least for me personally, the choice oftentimes is between radically, you know, saying today I'm deleting or deactivating the app for the weekend, or I'm going to be on it all the time. And that's by design. It's not really, you know, our failure as much as the fact that it's made that way, that it's difficult to use it in moderation. The thing I also think about a lot with giving attention to our phones and spending so much time on our phones and being with our phones is that every single moment of attention that I give to my phone is a moment of attention I do not give to myself, to my partner, to my family, to the world around me, to anything else. So I think it's really, at least for me, I don't know if it's helpful for someone else, but it's crucial to think about this in a way is that, like, the decision I'm making right now about, you know, whether I want to give some attention to my phone is actually a much larger decision about what I want to give attention to in my life in general, because all we have is today in this moment. However it sounds, I don't care. It's the truth, you know, like, life is lived in the daily activities, and if 6 to 8 hours are spent on our phones, then that's where the majority of our free time goes. And now the highlight for me in this book, and I kid you not, because I read like 5 books, and this experiment was mentioned in every single one of those books. So there was this experiment in which they took a bunch of people and they gave them an electric shock, and it was a painful electric shock, and they knew that because after they gave it, they would ask the people, you know, was it painful and would you pay to not receive the electric shock? And all of them said yes, absolutely, it's really painful, I would pay not to receive it. Afterwards, they took those same people and placed them in rooms, in separate rooms, and said, okay, so you're gonna sit here now by yourself with no devices for 15 minutes. You can just entertain yourself with your thoughts, with your head, and after 15 minutes you can leave. But if you're unable to do that, you know, within those 15 minutes, if you want to leave, you can just do the shock on yourself. And I don't remember now, oh my God, of course I forget exactly, but like something like, I don't know, half or 2/3 of the people gave themselves the shock instead of sitting with themselves for 15 minutes. And that is, and some people, the wildest thing is that most of those people gave themselves the shock several times, not just once. And so this is something I discussed in my quarantine video as well, where I find something deeply wrong with the fact that so many of us are unable to be with our own thoughts by ourselves, just by ourselves with our own thoughts. And that's something that it terrifies me. I can't relate and I don't understand, but it's really terrifying for me to think that that's the reality for many people. And I guess what I'm also thinking about is just the normalization of this. Like, we've absolutely, especially in the US, we've normalized the fact that, yeah, people can be alone with their thoughts. Like, it's an unpleasant place to be with yourself. The fact that we've normalized that, like, that's not okay. And I feel like I say this every month in some form or in one or another conversation, because genuinely, if you are unable to be by yourself with your own thoughts, with no devices and just yourself for even hours, hours, let's say for even 10 minutes, but you should be able to do it for hours, then there is something deeply, deeply wrong with you. And I of course say it with the most love and compassion in the world, but like, you need to seek help. And I feel like a lot of us need to seek help, because that's absolutely not a normal state to be in constant, like mode of escapism, just trying to distract ourselves from ourselves. That's really, really terrifying to me. And this also ties into another point, which is that our tolerance for boredom has drastically decreased. So think about every time we're in the line at the grocery store, whatever, we pull out our phone. Even when we step in the elevator and we know that it's going to take 10-15 seconds for us to get to our floor, we immediately pull out our phone, because we cannot tolerate boredom anymore. We need to be distracted at all times. And boredom is crucial, especially for creative thought. Boredom is necessary. We need it. And I actually want to take this a step further, because I think another thing why boredom is so important is because if you let yourself be bored, you actually end up, thinking about things or doing things that take you out of the boredom. Like, I personally never ever feel bored. I cannot relate to that idea, because there's always, even if I'm alone in the countryside with nothing for like weeks on end, and that's what children have, right? Like, our kids have that. You can take all the toys away from the kid, and kids are always going to find ways to entertain themselves, and they're never going to be bored. And I feel so blessed and happy that I still function that way. I think partially because I grew up with no tech, no TV or anything of the kind. But yeah, I think like boredom is so important. And so when I hear people say oftentimes, oh, I'm just bored, I was just bored today, boring this, boring that, I'm like, can't relate. Anyways, moving on. The conclusion here is that our phones are ruining our lives. I highly suggest the book, How to Break Up with Your Phone, but I also hope that, especially in the beginning when I talked about social media, that I was able to give some nuance to this, because I don't think it's black or white. Like, social media has saved my life. I think that's especially for people who are incredibly disconnected from their own communities, like diasporas or whatever, and like people, like-minded people, and knowledge that gets spread. Like, the knowledge on patriarchy, girl, like, it's all online. Like, everything I've learned on Twitter, and that learning, that knowledge has changed my life completely. So I know, it's not one or the other, but I do also think, like, first we got to be aware of how we are being manipulated so that we can fight back. And generally, we are on our phones for too long, so perhaps we want to consider changing that, reducing that, or so on. So actually, I'm going to be doing a second part of this video in which I'm going to be talking about concrete steps and ways to reduce your phone time, in case that's something you're interested in, just because I've done all this research instead of studying for my comprehensive exams, so might as well share it all. But yeah, that's it for now. Feel free to comment below. What has your experience been with, like, since you got the iPhone, or do you feel like your social media, or just not just social media, because some people be on fantasy sports and ESPN notifications and poker games, so I'm just saying, it's not necessarily Instagram. That's just the case for me. But do you feel like you are on them more than you would like it to be? Because that's another thing that I don't necessarily think we are trying to reduce how much we use it, to like an unnatural state, but actually get back to how much we would naturally like to use these things if it wasn't for the design of these apps and phones and technology manipulating us. Anyways, comment below, let me know, and much love to everyone.